In today's video, I've got 5 facts about Saber from the Fate series. I'll be covering her amazing combat abilities, noble phantasms, how she met her end in a previous life, that she was originally designed to be a male, and more. And hey, if you're new here, why not join the 414 community by hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss a video. I'll also quickly add that Saber is of course a major character and there is a lot to cover, so I'm going to stick to the Fate Stay Night and Fate Zero eras. Obviously, if you haven't seen all the Fate Stay Night routes or Zero, then there will be spoilers, so you've been warned. Anyway, with that being said, let's roll intro and get straight into the video. Saber, also known as the King of Knights, is a Saber-class servant during the 4th and 5th Holy Grail War set in the Fate Stay Night and Fate Zero series, where she was servant to Kuritsugu Emiya in the 4th Grail War, and then of course Shiro Emiya in the 5th. Saber stands at 154 centimeters tall, which is 5 foot, and weighs 92 pounds. On to the good stuff, I have her 3 sizes. Her bust is 28.5 inches, her waist 20.5 inches, and her hips are 30 inches. Saber's true identity is Artoria Pendragon, or Arthur Pendragon, as we are familiar with, which put simply is King Arthur, who, appearance-wise, it's clear to see that Arthur has been gender-bended here, like many other Fate characters of course. Interesting side fact here, in the original story of Fate, Artoria was intended to stay as Arthur and Shiro was going to be female. However, because they wanted the boy meets girl vibe between these two, their genders were swapped. Anyway, back to Artoria's appearance. She comes across as a woman in her late teens. She has long blonde hair and beautiful green eyes to combo. Artoria has a nice slim physique, though is more muscular than someone like Rin, which Artoria is a little bit shy about as she feels it makes her body seem unappealing, to which Shiro and most of us watching this video disagree, am I right? Saber's attire has a blue theme. We usually see her in her silver battle armor with the old-fashioned blue and white dress that has that yellow or gold trim. We have also seen Saber in casual attire as well. This is due to her inability to dematerialize in public. Because of this, she has been dressed in modern clothing so that she doesn't stand out. In Fate Zero, she is dressed in a black man's suit by Irisville, where, as in Fate Stay Night, Rin kits her out in a white shirt with a blue string tie, knee-length skirt comboed with tights and brown boots. There is also the classic yellow raincoat. And of course there are many, I guess you could say, forms of Saber. Obviously she has an alter form, there's Saber Lily. I'll more than likely do a separate video on those, so look forward to those. Artoria, also known as the Blue Saber. I touched on this in the Nero video I did, which I'll leave a link to in the cards now, so make sure you check that out after you've watched this video if you want to know more about it. But it was basically a trick to introduce Nero, the Red Saber, as her own character. And just to touch up on their only differences, obviously the dress colours, Nero in red, Saber in blue. A slight difference in the shade of green in their eyes, but you could say the main and most noticeable difference is the bust size. Yes, I know, no shame. You could say that's Fate Fortune Nero in this area, with a bust size of 32.5 inches compared to Artoria's 28.5 inches. It's the important things, right? Okay, so let's kick things off with Artoria's parameters, which are a servant's overall stats. Just like any other servant, her stats or parameters change dependent on what master she is serving at the time. While she was the servant to Shiro Emiya during the 5th Grail War, her parameters were as follows. Her strength was a B rank, endurance a C, agility once again a C, mana a B rank, luck again a B, and her noble phantasm was a C rank. Then, once she became servant to Rin Tosaka during the Unlimited Bladeworks route, her parameters were strength at an A rank, endurance a B, agility once again at a B, mana an A rank, luck this time an A plus rank, and her noble phantasm was an A double plus rank. And finally, while she was servant to Kuritsugu Emiya during the 4th Grail War, her parameters were as follows. Strength a B rank, endurance an A rank, agility an A, mana once again an A, luck a D rank, and noble phantasm a A++ rank. So as you can see, Rin is probably the best master suited to drawing out Saber's true potential, though you could say that there were little differences between Artoria's parameters under Kuritsugu Emiya. Kuritsugu, though fitting as a mage, did not share the same sense of chivalry or a code when in combat. Kuritsugu would, kind of do anything for the win and was considered an assassin of mages. This way of battle was completely different from Artoria's knightly ways, and thus the two were often at ends with one another. And then of course poor Shiro, the most unexperienced of the three mages, and this of course shows through Saber's stats. However, Shiro holds the greatest bond with Saber. Because being teamed up with Shiro, Saber is a lot weaker than she should be due to Shiro's inefficiency to provide her with a sufficient amount of mana. You could argue that he, almost gets the best out of her though due to her personal feelings for him. Okay, Artoria's sword skills are legendary. You'd expect this of the King of Knights. This means that she specializes in close combat. In fact, she believes that there isn't a servant that surpasses her in a close combat fight. Even if she was hit with a surprise attack while disarmed, she would come out on top. Her truth strength, however, lies in her enormous amount of magical energy. Because of her overwhelming abilities, Artoria isn't just suited to the legendary Saber class, which is said to be the most outstanding class in the Grail Wars. She could also be a lancer, rider, or even a caster, though she believes that magecraft is not the way of a king, and thus so also lacks the patience to learn it, and states that she is only suited to the Saber class. And now the weapon she wielded was obviously the legendary blade Excalibur, also known as the Sword of Promised Victory. She would use invisible air, which is a kind of noble phantasm of hers, that she'd conceal her holy blade to hide her true identity. With this invisible air, she can also release large blasts of it towards her enemies, and not only can she cover Excalibur in this invisible air, but, other objects too. But when necessary, she will reveal Excalibur, and once she does so, she unleashes a huge blast of light that will, pretty much destroy anything within its path. Saber's armor is pretty special too. Rather than it being its own object, it is actually made of her magical energy, so you could say that her armor is almost an extension of her own body. Because of this, she can materialize and dematerialize it at will. The armor consists of a heavy silver white chestplate, greaves, gauntlets, and long tassets shaped like a skirt. And the awesome thing about this armor is that it can't be permanently damaged. If it is slashed or chipped, Saber can instantly repair it using her magical energy. The downside to the armor is that it takes a lot of magical energy just to even wear, so sometimes she'll have to prioritize repairing her armor rather than healing her own wounds, and that's just down to its impressive defensive capabilities. However, if Saber chooses to battle without her armor, she will see a significant boost in her power, but of course this comes at the risk of leaving herself defenseless. Next up is, sticking with Artoria's abilities, and we'll talk a little bit more about her noble phantasms. Now, I mentioned that Saber was amazing, if not the best at close combat due to her legendary combat skills, but one of the things that made her so proficient was that she utilized a skill of hers called Mana Burst, which combined these sword skills with her enormous amount of magical energy. And her whole combat style was pretty much centered around this Mana Burst ability. What she would do is infuse both her weapon and her body with mana, and this would give her skills like sword technique, movement, and guarding a significant boost, as well as a huge increase in both power and speed, which was increased by 6 times of that of what her speed normally was. And just as her speed is increased, she could also focus this mana burst into a single more powerful strike. Interestingly, and you definitely wouldn't have thought so, but Saber's body was physically more frail than that of Shiro or Rin if she wasn't to use this mana burst ability. With this ability, though she had the body of a young girl, she could take on monsters such as Berserker head on. Her strikes, were so powerful that they could be compared to the firepower of a shotgun, whereas, a servant like Lance's strikes you'd compare to that of a precise sniper rifle. And not only physically impressive, but Artoria was mentally sound to match. Her battle instincts were incredible. You could almost say that her instinct was like a sixth sense. She could predict incoming attacks and dodge them accordingly. And what she would do was listen to the sound of the incoming attack cutting the air around her and then act on it instantly. Artoria also ranks highly in riding. This of course stems from her being a knight who were all very skilled in the arts of mounted warfare. While she could easily master normal mounts such as a horse or a chariot, she is not skilled enough to mount a divine beast such as griffins or dragons. This is because she is not of the rider class. Though she can easily mount motorbikes or other automobiles, even though she had never driven before, she was instantly able to understand how these vehicles worked and make instinctive decisions while driving them. This is because they are, classed as this day and age's normal mounts, I guess, and her skill set allowed her to do this. Interestingly as well, her riding skill was an A rank under Kiritsuku, where it was a B rank under both Rin and Shiro. Even more awesome, she can even implement her mana burst ability to her riding skills, as we saw when she was ripping through the streets in Fate Zero. Worth mentioning as well that Artoria was born with the magical energy of that of a dragon, hence her Pendragon name. She carries the element of the red dragon, which means her heart, body and magic circuits are all unique, almost described as that of a phantasm within the human body. Because of this, she excels in comparison to normal humans and mages. This gives more information on how and why she has so much magical energy at her disposal. And as well as having huge amounts of magical energy because of her dragon blood, she also has a very huge magical resistance, enough so that she is able to neutralize any magic below that of an A rank. As well as that, because of this blood, she can even fight back against command spells, as we saw when Caster ordered her to kill Rin, though doing this of course takes almost all of Artoria's strength and would be left in a lot of pain after the struggle. Finally, Artoria's noble phantasms. I've touched on two already. One, the A double plus rank Excalibur, and the C rank noble phantasm Invisible Air. She has one more, which is an EX rank barrier type called Avalon, also known as the ever distant Utopia. This is the scabbard to the Holy Sword Excalibur and made by the same fairies that made the blade it holds. The divine materials of this scabbard are therefore unknown, and this scabbard also acts as the catalyst to summon Saber during the 4th and 5th Grail Wars. The scabbard as a noble phantasm is absolute defense. What it does is it shields the user in the domain of the fairies, which is Avalon. The scabbard also grants the holder immense healing capabilities. As an example, any critical or fatal wounds will be healed rapidly. Even lost limbs or vital organs can be repaired, though one strike to the head or the brain would be game over. Avalon can also be sealed within a person's body. In Fate Zero, Kiritsuku Emiya sealed it within Irisville. Not only that, but it can be removed and then planted within another, as he did so for a dying Shiro Emiya, which of course then led to him being Saber's master in the 5th Grail War. Then there's the A double plus rank noble phantasm, which is Excalibur itself, the golden sword of Artoria's that is usually concealed within the invisible air to hide it. The sword is a typical western sword. In length it's 90 centimeters and it has a width of 12 centimeters. Of course the blade was made, like I mentioned, by the same fairies that made the scabbard, Avalon. As a noble phantasm, it basically amplifies the user's power. In Artoria's case, it amplifies the power she has from the red dragon and turns her burst of magical energy into a huge destructive beam of light once swung, so powerful that it is described as the ultimate killing technique. This power is also so great that it is considered amongst the greatest of noble phantasms. This being said, it of course takes a huge amount of magical energy to fire this single blast, so it is a move that she can't just fire off at will, meaning that timing is everything here, but good luck to whoever is on the receiving end of this. And even if they manage to dodge it, they'd just be completely distracted by the sheer intensity of the blade's power once used. It's also worth mentioning that this noble phantasm works much better at a distance. The more of a gap between Artoria and her enemy, the more destructive the power of this single strike is. Finally, the C-ranked noble phantasm Invisible Air, also known as Barrier of the Wind King. We talked about this a bit earlier. Invisible Air is basically multiple layers of wind that are then compressed into a super high pressured air combined with immense magical energy. It then distorts the light around it and makes whatever is inside of it seem invisible. This ability you could say is actually closer to like Magecraft in the form of a bounded field rather than a noble phantasm, but really impressive nonetheless. And as I mentioned earlier, she usually uses this to conceal her and Excalibur's identity and could also be used as a strong strike, but she has also used it it on her motorcycle in Fate Zero. This was to decrease the air resistance to the bike and increase the vehicle's speed while keeping the back wheel firmly on the ground at these much higher speeds. Artoria's Japanese voice actress is Ayako Kawasumi. She has voiced other characters such as Akari Kamagishi in Two Heart, Kazumi Yoshida from Shakugan no Shana, Lena in Queen's Blade, and many more. Saber's English voice actress in the original Fate Stay Night series and the movie is Kate Higgins. She has voiced other characters such as Sakura Haruno in Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, Karin Kurosaki from Bleach, C2 in Code Geass, and many more of course. Then Saber's English voice actress in the Studio Dean adaptation of Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works is Michelle Ruff. She has voiced other characters such as Rukia Kuchiki in Bleach, Euphemia from Code Geass, Sinon in Sword Art Online 2, Yoko Littner from Gurren Lagann, and of course, you guessed it, many more. And then finally we have Saber's English voice actress in the, I think it's UFO Table or UFO Table adaptation of Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works and Fate Zero. This was Kari Walgren. She has voiced other characters such as Kagami Hiragi in Lucky Star, Celti Sturluson from Dororora, and you guessed it, many, many more. As we all know, Saber is actually King Arthur. Now, there are many variations of King Arthur's story and even supposed variations of him himself. One of those is the British Arthur and the other is the Roman Artorius. It is said that these two achievements have, been merged, and over time it gives us the legend that we know today. Anyway, Artoria was born in the time of the war that saw the start of the collapse of the Roman Empire. This place in time was known as the Dark Ages. Artoria was born as the daughter and successor to the throne of Britain to her father Uther Pendragon and Igraine, I think I pronounced that right, who was the wife to Uther's servant, the Duke of Cornwall. The legend of King Arthur was actually a prophecy made by the wizard Merlin. Uther, of course, believed in this prophecy and was of course devastated when he found out that his child was born a girl instead of a boy. Merlin, however, was unfazed as he knew the sex of this child wouldn't matter, but as we all know, back in those times, the king couldn't have a female successor. So Artoria was made to be raised as a child of a knight. The knight she was entrusted to was Sir Ector, who was a simple but wise old knight. Artoria was raised along with her now adopted brother Sir Kay by Sir Ector. The pair were trained every day to become strong and eventually loved each other as siblings. Eventually, Artoria became Sir Kay's squire and received further training from him as well as carrying out a squire's day-to-day duties. Now, Artoria was actually a better swordsman than her now brother, but had never actually beat him in a fight. Not because of a lack of skill, but because Sir Kay would actually make up his own rules and declare himself the victor on many occasions. But finally, the day of prophecy had arrived. People from all around the country gathered round to see who would be selected as the new King of Britain. The selection process, as we all know, was a sword in a stone that had an inscription on it that read, "Whoever pulls this sword from the stone is righteous king born of England." Many, of course, tried and failed to remove the blade, and then, of course, up stepped Artoria, who at this point was only an apprentice, not a qualified knight. This, however, didn't stop her as she reached for the sword without hesitation. At this point, Merlin now appeared before her. He told Artoria to think things through because once she pulled the sword from the stone, she would no longer be human. Artoria didn't really react to this news, as her ideals of a king was that a king was not a human anyway, due to the duties laid upon them. Thus, Artoria pulled the sword from the stone and was covered in a huge beam of light. At this moment, everything changed. The gender of the king didn't matter, so what if she's female? It's no issue if she was a good king, though of course at this point no one knew she was female except Merlin, her father, and Sir Kay. Anyway, this was the start of her legend, and it was also at this time that when she pulled the sword Caliburn from the stone that she stopped aging. She was 15 years old at this point and would remain so due to the magic of the sword. From this point, of course, Artoria, as we all know, ran Britain from Camelot along with her Knights of the Round Table. In the space of 10 years, she fought and won 12 battles, leading the front lines. She was seen as a god of war and praised for her divine immortality. Now, Artoria excelled in all aspects of being a king, all but one. And, that was producing an heir. She, of course, sought Merlin for advice on this, and I'm sure you all know the story of what happened here. Yeah, so Merlin made Artoria capable of producing sperm. Yes. It was around this time that Artoria's sister Morgan Le Fay took some of her sperm, developed it within her own ovaries, and created a clone of Artoria that would become what we know now as Mordred. Mordred was of course raised without Artoria's knowledge and eventually managed to possess her own place on the Round Table through her own merits. Mordred loved and worshipped her king. She eventually did find out that Artoria was her father. Ecstatic with the news, she tried to claim her heritage to the throne. However, Artoria refused to recognize her as an heir to the throne, probably down to like the bad blood between Artoria and her sister Morgan. So no matter how much Mordred worked to excel above the others, Artoria still refused to recognize her. This turned Mordred's love for Artoria into hate. So the more that she was rejected, the more Mordred's hatred burned for Artoria. Around this time, of course, Artoria as king had to have a wife. This woman was Guinevere, who Lancelot, one of Artoria's closest friends, had eyes for. At this time, nothing happened in this love triangle, but it does later on down the line. Now married, Guinevere, of course, knew that Artoria was female and had to bear the guilt of hiding this secret, but, chose to do so. Of course, Guinevere and Lancelot eventually began an affair. This was, of course, revealed by traitors of Camelot. Artoria, however, did not see this as an act of betrayal and understood Guinevere's sacrifice, knowing that she had kept her being a female secret for all this time. Instead of punishment, Artoria issued the two a letter with her blessings, saying that their actions must have had good reasons. Lancelot, however, became afraid and decided to run. This would, unfortunately lead to tragedy in future events. So, while repelling an assault on her country's borders, her scabbard Avalon was stolen from her. Once they returned from the borders, Artoria found out of this civil unrest that had happened and headed out to battle once more. This was the Battle of Camlan. In this battle, she managed to kill Mordred, but unfortunately was mortally wounded by the traitorous knight at the last encounter. Her dying body was carried to a holy isle by that of Sir Bedivere. Artoria's last orders to the grieving knight was to get rid of Excalibur by throwing it back to the Lady of the Lake. In Artoria's final moments, she reflected on her failures, regrets, and her life as a king. In her last breath, she reached out to a being known as the World for the opportunity to become a heroic spirit so that she could one day claim the Grail to save her country. But thanks for watching. This was my video 5 facts about Saber from the Fate series. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you'd like to see more characters from the Fate franchise, then let me know in the comments. Also, don't forget to smash the like button if you enjoyed this video, as it really does help my videos reach a wider audience. And of course, subscribe for more anime content. Till next time, my fellow weebs,